Welcome to Inside the Trojans Huddle, WeAreSC's weekly video show. We talk about all things USC football and college football and lately transfer portal, which we'll talk a little bit more about today, I imagine, for better or for worse. You know the usual crew if you watch the show. We have Mark Culkin. Mark Culkin is one of WeAreSC's busiest writers. Writes multiple articles a week, does practice reports, has his own podcast, and generally finds a way to lose the game at the end of our show through self-inflicted wounds. We have Eric McKinney. McKinney is the editor-in-chief of WeAreSC, recruiting guru, writes all kinds of articles, tells everybody else what to do except on this show, and then I get my revenge. I'm Chris Arledge. I'm your substitute host. Greg Katz is watching us to make sure we don't get too far out of line, but he has no ability to stop us in real time, so we're going to do whatever we want. All right, guys, we're ready to start today? So we've been talking about the transfer portal for a few weeks, and each week the discussion seems to get just a little bit more depressing. This is not the transfer portal period we all expected. I don't think it's a transfer portal period that Lincoln Riley expected. So I want to do this today. I want to go through the various position groups, and I want to talk about whether we have what we need right now at all of those position groups. And if not, I guess we'll talk about what that means. If so, we'll celebrate. All right, let's start us off. Let's start in the most obvious place, because this is what we've been talking about week after week. McKinney, do we have what we need on the defensive line going into the 2024 season?
Yeah, just the Band-Aid off like that, right? Straight to the defensive line. We don't tiptoe into quarterback.
We don't build up
on this one.
Build up. We just jump right into the paint.
What USC needs, again, it's a different conversation to have what you can consider a successful season, or to have what, Lincoln Riley will say we want to win championships and all of that. They do not have the defensive line right now to feel really good about matching up with the best teams out there when you're talking about needing to win multiple playoff games. No. I think that they have enough. Even if they don't add anybody else, I think you have enough to develop a competent, solid defensive line. It is not right now a defensive line where opposing teams are walking into this game going, oh my gosh, we have no answers for this group. Other teams are going to feel pretty good about being able to match up. Even if you get a Bear Alexander, a one-on-one guy, if you have a really good interior lineman, I think you still feel okay about not having to send multiple guys at him every time. So in terms of, if Lincoln Riley was talking this offseason about we want to put a defensive line up there that strikes fear into opposing offenses, no, you don't have enough for that. You have enough to win some college football games with this schedule right now. You certainly have enough to be competitive in every game.
What do you think, Culkin? This may be the easiest question I ask you all day. Do we have enough on the defensive line to be where USC wants to be?
USC has enough on the defensive line right now because that's what they have on the defensive line right now. And the prospects of whatever else is out there is looking pretty slim. So, I'm being pragmatic about it right now. Yeah, they have what they have, and it's going to be up to Coach Henney and Coach Nua to kind of take that ball of clay and mold it into that defensive line that, as you said, can they be competitive? Can they hold up? Can they make the transition from the Pac-12 style of play to the Big Ten conference style of play? Look, unless there's some magical unicorn that's going to appear out of nowhere, right now, you're kind of looking at the last call of the bar scene. And you're looking, do we want to? Is that really worth taking home right now? So you got what you have. Let's use it and make the best of it.
You got what you have. Let's use it. Make the best of it. That's inspiring.
It's my best.
I think you're right. I don't think. Look, here's the thing. I do think it's true that USC has enough talent up front that if they can avoid disastrous injuries, they can become a pretty decent defense, right? This is what we've been begging for some time. We've been begging, can we please just be competent defensively? I think with this staff, I think with the coach that's going to be coaching these guys up, and we're going to be relying on some really young guys to play a lot of minutes. I think they have a chance to be competent up front. Competent up front doesn't get you a national title. It doesn't get you a top 5 finish. Competent up front could get you 9-3. And I think that's and you know, obviously Bear Alexander has to, 1, stay healthy, and 2, he's going to have to play a lot of plays. I don't know if Bear likes to play a lot of plays. You know, sometimes big guys would rather play 50 than 70, and they'll go harder in the 50 than they will if you put them in for 70 plays. I don't know, but they're going to have to get, Braylon Shelby is going to have to show up big this year, right? They're going to have that. He has all the talent in the world. He has a year in the system. He has a year in the weight room. He has a year on the nutrition program. Braylon Shelby has to make a lot of plays off the edge. They're going to have to get, Elijah Hughes is going to have to make plays, and they're probably going to have to get, you know, Carlin Jones or one of these incoming true freshmen. You know, maybe the guy from that was the Minnesota commit. These are big-bodied kids. I don't know that they're going to be ready to dominate, but look, Mike Patterson and Sean Cody were ready to play as true freshmen and do some things. I don't know that any of these guys are Mike Patterson or Sean Cody, but you know, you have enough that the defense can still be better. But if you wanted USC with this defensive staff to show up with a first-rate defense and turn USC into an elite program this year, they just didn't get it done.
Well, let me
know. Go ahead.
Do you think the talent right now that's on the roster is better suited for D'Anton Lynn's scheme compared to what Alex Grinch was trying to, you know, take that square peg and put into a round hole? I mean, you think about USC went after Jay Toya, allegedly, in the transfer portal. Jay decided to stay at UCLA. Well, Kobe Pepe is kind of USC's version of Jay Toya. So maybe they have the pieces.
You mean they weigh approximately the same? Is that what you're saying?
Similar type of thing.
I watched Jay Toya play last year, and I haven't seen that from Pepe. So can he become that?
Look,
I don't know.
But Mark's right in terms of Kobe Pepe being the one guy on the defense probably that's most benefited by this change in style. Now, D'Anton Lynn had a couple guys at UCLA, I think we can all agree, better than what Kobe Pepe has done. So yeah, the idea that he can now sort of be useful in this defense compared to what he was asked to do in the previous one, yes, but you want 4 of those guys all sort of significantly better than that, and that's what Lynn had to work with a little bit more at UCLA. So yeah, there's going to be a transition. You took a couple years and just sort of chopped this roster down under Alex Grinch, and so now you've got to build it back up. So I don't know if there's anyone that you say, hey, this guy didn't do anything under Grinch and now he's ready to just absolutely blast off under Lynn. I don't think there's anybody like that, but I do think that faith in they're going to be in the right spot more often. They're not going to be asked to do ridiculous things. They're going to be able to play straight up under control and in a way that they're capable of doing. I think that's where you see sort of the biggest step forward from everybody on the roster.
I would throw Anthony Lucas into that category of somebody who has to.
He better, right? I mean, this is and the thing about Lucas is he's big enough that you can play him. You can play him at defensive end. You can play him at defensive tackle. You can move him around. He's got all kinds of athletic ability. Have we seen anything from him? I mean, that's the thing. And I'm willing to say that I think every defensive player on the roster will be better this year because Alex Grinch's scheme was such a disaster that people didn't know what they were supposed to be doing. They were consistently lined up in situations that made it almost impossible to to play sound defense. I mean, it was an absolute disaster. So I think all these guys are likely to be better. The thing that bothers me about Lucas is that you know how much talent he has. You know what a big time recruit he was. He comes over and everybody's talking about how this guy's explosive, he's big, he's fast, and you think, okay. And then he doesn't do anything. I mean, all year he didn't do anything. So I don't know what to make of that. I would like to think that he's going to be more comfortable this year, that the coach, that he will be better coached, that he will be put in situations that are more conducive to his talents. And if so, if you've got Braylon Shelby playing well, if Bear Alexander stays healthy and plays well, if Anthony Lucas plays close to the level of his talent, all of a sudden you look at the defensive line and say, okay, there's some guys there, right? I mean, like elite talent guys. You don't have as many as Georgia has, but you've got some elite talent guys. You just hope that they show up. I don't know. They didn't last year, but it's not entirely their fault. I mean, there were a lot of guys last year that didn't show up. There were guys that came over from other programs where they played really well, and then Alex Grinch plugs them in, and they don't know what they're doing.
For me, that's why Nate Clifton is so big. I mean, you look back and when USC brought in those transfer guys last year, hey, Keon Bars, he did some things at Arizona. Jack Sullivan, he did some things at Purdue. I mean, less than nothing at USC. And again, we've kind of long established this. We are not pointing fingers at the players specifically when that happens. They've got to get some stuff out of Nate Clifton. He's a guy who comes in, you see what he did at Vanderbilt, and it's kind of serviceable, but not a lot where he's just like making plays all over the place and just this dynamic guy. But serviceable, competent, a guy that you could plug in and be in the right place, that needs to get you more this year than those transfers where you hoped it was the same thing that they could do last year. What they provided was just not enough. And so Clifton, for me, is a guy, again, like Anthony Lucas, can play inside, can play outside, can do a lot of things, maybe plug holes for you where if you don't have, the sheer numbers you thought maybe you were going to get in the portal, that's a guy who can play a couple different spots. I think what he does is going to be pretty significant for this defensive line. And again, if you're going to say these coaches are all about development, again, it's not that there's no emphasis on recruiting, but it was clear these coaches are here to coach up what USC has. That's something where you can't bring a guy in and then see him get worse in a year as he's at USC.
Yeah, and look, let's be honest about something. When we talk about how bad USC was in the front seven last year, let's keep in mind that it was not at all unusual to just by alignment know that USC could not defend what was coming. I mean, it would happen over and over again. You would have no big bodies outside of a guard on one side of the offense. And you're hoping that a bunch of off-the-ball defensive backs are going to come up and stop the run. It was the dumbest thing I'd ever seen. And it's not like they would try it every once in a while on a 3rd and 8, and then they get surprised because somebody run a toss sweep. They'd run it over and over and over again. Against Washington, against Arizona, by alignment, they decided not to play the run every down, all game. It was stunning. I've never seen anything like it. If I went to a high school game, just a random high school game, not modern day, like just a random game, a lower level, maybe there are 17 boys in the whole high school, and I went and watched them play, I would not expect to see that. It was the dumbest display of coaching I'd ever seen in my life. And I sat through Clay Helton's T. Martin offense. I sat through the Paul Hackett years. I've seen some stuff. It's not like I spent my whole time in college football only watching Nick Saban games. No, I've seen some stuff, and I've never seen anything like it. Do I expect that USC will line up in a way that will give them a chance to hold the edge and take up at least a little bit of space on the inside? I think so. If they get huge improvement from Anthony Lucas, if Braylon Shelby's ready to dominate, if Bear takes a step forward, then at least your starting group might actually look pretty good. They're not going to have the talent you want behind it, but the starting group may look okay. And look, the last 2 years, what were we begging for? Can we just be in the top 40 defensively, please? I think they have enough up front to do that, but they don't have enough up front to go and shut people down the way Georgia does, the way Michigan did last year. They're not going to do that, right? Zero chance of that. But you know, it's disappointing. I think we all expected they'd add 2 or 3 really nice pieces up front, and that would change the whole nature of our discussion, right? Now, then we would be talking about, okay, this looks like a team that can beat everybody on the schedule and make a run. But I don't think we believe that under these circumstances. Anything else you want to say about the D line? We talk about the D line every week. Those poor guys, if they watch this show, if they have friends that watch this show, they probably talk about how we tear them up all the time. And we're not really. I think some of these guys can play. They just don't have enough. They don't have enough big bodies on the roster.
Yeah.
Okay, well, let's move to another position that has been a struggle for years at USC. I'm trying to think how long it's been since we felt good about this position group. Does USC have what they need at linebacker? Mark, start us off.
Yeah, I think so. I think the addition of Easton Mascarenas Arnold takes a lot of that pressure off of Mason Cobb. You've got Rajon Davis coming back again. You've got Eric Gentry, you know, his unique skill set. I think you actually have some addition by subtraction because you're not forcing Tackett Curtis on the field. And again, the biggest addition, we're talking about it and we repeat it often enough, but just the fact that you're bringing in a different defensive scheme and you're lining guys up in place where they know what they're going to be doing, I think you've got enough. We didn't even really talk about, hey, how is USC going into the transfer portal for another linebacker? Once Mascarenas Arnold came aboard, that was pretty much it. Our focus has been on 2 key positions, and we're going to talk about the other one here momentarily, shortly, but interior defensive line, offensive tackle depth. Other than that, wide receiver was the 3rd most requested position because of numbers. I don't.
Some of those.
They did get some.
If you want to look at silver linings, we got some of those guys.
As far as the linebacker, yeah, I think they have enough. As far as experience and then youth, you got the 2 kids from Michigan, one that's still coming. You got Jaden Walker, you got Desmond Stevens. They brought in some of that Midwest, you know, Big Ten type of linebacker that they're looking for. In fact, one of them is already, I think, the biggest linebacker on the roster, if I remember correctly. Eric's always about the numbers. He could probably confirm that. So I do.
That, Eric. Can you confirm that for us?
And
it's Stevens, right? And he's 230.
Desmond Stevens showed up, looks good.
And Matt Ants, look, you just listen to him talk and you watch him working with those players, and you're like, man, I haven't seen that in a while. It just feels like you've got a decent group all of a sudden, whether it's from coaching or the talent itself. I think it's all going to come together this time.
So big thumbs up from Culkin. What do you think, Eric? Do we have what we need at linebacker?
I think so. UCLA's inside guys were okay, not great under Lynn, but no, I mean, we've talked a lot about UCLA just not getting gashed for huge running plays or big plays really of any kind from offenses. And that makes you think that whatever Dan Lynn is asking those interior linebackers to do, they can do it, right? They don't need to be these unbelievable elite players to get it done. I think USC right now, you know, we talk about that top 4 all the time. I think what USC fans saw from Mason Cobb last year wasn't fully what he can do. I don't think Cobb is a phenomenal linebacker, a top 2-round pick in the draft or anything. I think he's better than what he showed last season. I think Mascarenas Arnold is a guy that comes in and plays solid for them. I think Elijah Newby maybe this year is what we all thought maybe Tackett Curtis could be last year. And I think being able to sprinkle him in a little bit more rather than needing or wanting to, whatever it was, shove him on the field for that amount of snaps when it was clear he wasn't ready for that amount of snaps. I think that might be the difference in kind of how he develops. But I think you have enough. Again, is it something where an opposing team comes in and goes, "Oh my gosh, we got to watch," right? USC, when they play LSU to open the season, Harold Perkins, you better know where that guy is every single play because he will wreck you if you don't. USC doesn't have that at linebacker, but I think they have enough guys, enough experience, and then that young talent where, again, you're going to be okay in terms of talent and numbers to get you through the season. And it's the different, right? It's how we talk about the USC defense. Look, we are under no expectation that you need to have a top 5 group, a top 10 group. I think you eventually do, right? If Lincoln Riley is here for the long haul and he wants to play defense and he wants to win national championships, you've got to get there. The expectation that they're going to be there this year, that's not really what we're talking about. We're talking about top 40, top 50, just a defense that is in the right place. I think you've got the group at linebacker to be able to do that.
Yeah, I agree with that. I mean, if we're talking about reasonable expectations, can we have a competent defense that isn't given a chunk plays every down? Then I think they probably have what they need a linebacker. I agree. Mason Cobb is better than what we saw last year. Frankly, Tacky Curtis is better than what we saw last year. I actually think the kid will turn out to be a pretty good football player. Imagine coming from small time high school football where you don't really play linebacker. You show up and as a true freshman, they throw you on the field and you have to play in Alex Grinch's scheme. I mean, I'm upset at the kid for bowing out after USC invested so much in him to our detriment last year. But at the same time, that ain't his fault. He's going to be all right. But I do think you're right. Elijah Newby is a kid that has tremendous athleticism and length. Whether he's going to be thick enough to play inside as a true freshman, I guess we'll see where he is come September. But that's a guy that may be 225, and at that point, with that speed, he might be able to do some things. Mascarenas Arnold was an All Pac-12 first team guy last year. That's a legitimate player. I don't think he's a future first round pick, but I don't know that that's what we're looking for at this point. We're looking for guys who can get everybody lined up and make plays. I think he can. I still think Eric Gentry is a tremendous talent, and he's weird for a linebacker, right? He doesn't look like a linebacker, and I don't know if he can stay healthy, but he causes problems, and he's a guy you can move around and do lots of different things with. I think he could play some nickel. I think he could line up on the edge. Certainly in 3rd and long, I want him in the game with that wingspan. He causes problems. And Mason Cobb will play better in this defense. Of course he will. I mean, one of the problems you had last year, and a big part of it was scheme, is that you had offensive linemen getting to the second level immediately. Like immediately, you would have guards and tackles 4 yards deep, and our linebackers are fighting through the trash and not very effectively. It's not supposed to work that way. So yeah, I think USC will be competent at linebacker this year. They will. This group is not going to make you forget the 2008 group. It's not going to make you forget the 1988 group. Or 1989. It's not that kind of group. But I think they'll be solid. Okay, I think we're making progress as we go. How about this? Do we have what we need at defensive back? Eric McKinney.
Yeah, that's the one spot where they did really well in the portal. And DeCarlos Nicholson was like the one guy where coming over, you didn't know as much about him as obviously the Pac-12 guys, the UCLA guys, and Akili Arnold from Oregon State. He was great this spring. And so once he kind of checks that box off, then you really like what they added. Jacoby Covington dealt with kind of some injuries last year. When he's healthy, he is right up there with them and one of the best, I think one of the most physically gifted corners USC has had in a while. That guy can play. And then you're talking about Marcellus Williams being one of the best defensive players of spring as an early enrollee true freshman. Zion Branch, you still haven't seen kind of extended what he can do when he's healthy. When he was healthy last year, he started, got in, played a bunch there. So I think at safety, at corner, Greedy coming in as a nickel there. Now, like you've got depth, you've got talent, you've got experience, you've got kind of youth. I mean, there's Christian Pierce was a guy we talked about a lot last year. You kind of forget that he's still in there and can play and has some experience there now. Anthony Beavers is a guy that showed up in the bowl. I mean, yes. If they don't have enough in the secondary, they're never going to have enough in the secondary because that though every single spot back there seems like it is at least too deep with guys that you'd feel comfortable starting this fall.
Yeah. What do you think, Mark?
Yeah, I'm just thankful that Eric didn't mention Prophet Brown and his 106-yard, interception return for a touchdown. Gives me something to talk about. Yeah, this is by far the deepest group on the roster, especially on the defensive side of the ball. And, we talk about, can USC have a top 40-ish type of, defense in the country? Oh, I think the pass defense is going to help that out a lot. We talk about it. We allude to it. Big Ten isn't known for their proficient and their prolific passing attacks. So you already have a good, solid group at cornerback and at safety and nickel at USC. And, if you go down the quarterback list of the teams USC's playing, who pops out? Who jumps out and scares you? So I think that, USC's strength on the defense this year might be their pass defense, which in the past, no pun intended, it hasn't been. It's always been, all right, that guy's head is turned around, the ball's going to go right over his head, and they're going to be in chase mode. I didn't see any of that in the spring game. I saw 1% of that.
Well, yeah, I agree with both of you guys. I like the talent, and there's both a lot of experienced talent and lots of Zion Branch types where you look at guys and say that guy can, if that guy can just stay healthy and get some time on the field, he's going to be a football player. And this is going to be unpopular with about half of USC fans, but Dante Williams is gone. And I'm unbelievably thankful for that, because as much press as that guy gets for being a great recruiter, as many high school kids as there are who are enamored by Dante Williams, when did USC's corners ever get better over the last 5 years? When did it happen? The one guy everybody wants to point to is a guy who had started for 2 years at Colorado before he showed up. So just having a defensive coordinator who is competent, and by the way, is a guy who grew up playing in the secondary and coaching the secondary, Doug Belk, who is a tremendous football coach. The combination of the talent and the new scheme and that coaching, you're going to see a very different deal from the secondary. And I think because of the experience you have there, I think you're going to see a lot of confused quarterbacks. And that's something that Danton Lynn is known for. And the ability to disguise coverages, especially if you're talking about new quarterbacks, and USC is going to play quite a few of those, is just immensely helpful. So yeah, I feel good about that. And look, even if you're not great against the run, if you're competent and you're not giving up gash plays and you're pretty good in the secondary, you have a chance to be a pretty good defense. And I think that's entirely possible. Okay, I'm going to skip over one of these groups that I have on my list. We'll hit it last. Let's talk about running backs. Do we have what we need at running back this year? Go ahead, Mark. You're saying yes.
That's an NFL running back room. I mean, they brought in Brian Jackson, and you look at the other guys, and all right, Quentin Joyner, he looks great. Marion Peterson, he looks great. You brought in your portal transfer guy in Woody Marks. But every single time I look at Brian Jackson, man, that looks like a big-time NFL running back already. And he's the youngest of the group. I'm pleased with the guys they have back there. Really happy. What'll make me happier is if Lincoln Riley decides to use those guys like USC is known for using the running back room, because it feels like they're kind of getting away from that.
Yeah. Well, if they run block better, then maybe we will. Eric, what do you think? We have what we need at running back?
Yeah, in a perfect world, you've got a Darwin Barlow still there, like in between Marks and Joyner, someone with more experience than what Quentin Joyner brings. The world now is you can't have that guy anymore, or else you don't sign Brian Jackson or one of the one of the second year guys leaves or whatever. So if you can only have four talented guys, yeah, this is a pretty good four. I mean, you again, Quentin Joyner got some run early. What stands out to me was that run late against Notre Dame where he just gets the ball ripped away. And you hope that's kind of one of those eye-opening things where you got to experience that to know what this is like and what you're going to see in basically every game this year. So if you grow up from that, and certainly all reports and indications are that this guy is ready to go this year. So you're comfortable with him sort of as the number two guy there. And Amarian Peterson is going to push, I think, all year. I hope he doesn't become the Darwin Barlow where we constantly get asked on the board, why doesn't he get more time? Why doesn't he get more touches? You hope that he can get involved a little bit, but I know people love Woody Marks, and he's a talented guy that's going to help out in the receiving game too. The question is, can you pass block? I mean, that is going to be the huge question from this room, and I don't know if anyone has proven consistently they can. So again, if you had a guy with some experience who you knew could pass block, that would make you feel better about the room. It's plenty talented enough to do hopefully everything you want to do from that position this year.
Yeah, I think that's right. I don't think there's any transcendent talents in that room, right? There's no Reggie Bush. There's not a guy who's going to be a first round draft choice, I don't think. Of course, that's unusual these days anyway with running backs, but I don't think you have that. But I think you have four guys who are all capable of playing really well and making plays. Maybe a little bit like the group from 2 years ago where Travis Dye and Austin Jones, although I think this group may be a little bit more talented than that one. But that was a group of guys who, if there were 7 yards to be gained, would get you 7 yards. And I think this group's a little bit like that. And I think they can catch the ball pretty well. So I feel good about the running backs. I don't think you have the star power at running back that you have a wide receiver, which we're going to talk about next. I don't think you have that. But I think you have a really solid group of four. And then I just hope they stay healthy because four is not a lot. I mean, you don't need four running backs if everybody's healthy. But if you have two guys go down to an ankle injury and you only have two, that's a problem. So if they stay healthy, they'll be all right. I wish they had another body. But maybe they'll move Zachariah Branch back to tailback and just throw him the ball in the flats. I don't know. Let's talk about the wide receivers. Do we feel good about the wide receiver group, guys? Mark, what do you think? You feel good about the wide receiver group?
I read last week that USC doesn't even have one of the top 10 groups in the country.
I read that too.
Yeah. Yeah. Anyways, I feel good. Anytime you can line up four guys named Zachariah Branch, Deuce Robinson, Jacoby Lane, Mekhi Lemon, and then you got some backups behind them, like Kyron Hudson, you're going to be okay. I mean, I was complaining. People were complaining that USC had plenty of wide receivers. You got a lot of top end wide receivers, but when you only have 7, you don't have enough to run a practice. So that's why USC went out and got a couple more. They brought back Kyle Ford. Again, I think his versatility is going to help a lot, just because of the different ways you can use them. You can line them up outside. You can line them up in the slot. You can actually line them up off, kind of in a tight end role because of his body style. So I like what they have there. Miller Moss is very familiar with him. He's been last year going up to it. The practice reps were, Miller Moss was your second string. Well, a lot of these guys who are now going to be asked to be first string for the rest of the year going forward, they were practicing with Miller most of the time. So that chemistry is already there.
Yeah. What do you think, Eric?
Yeah, I think it's good. And I think the numbers now, Kyle Ford, Jay Fair coming in from Auburn as a slot guy. I think your numbers are good to where you don't have 14, right? And you're like, how are we going to get these guys time? This is a group where all these guys can shuttle in, shuttle out. You mentioned Zachariah Branch being able to do a few things. Jay Fair now with he and Mekhi Lemon, you can put them in the slot and run Zachariah Branch somewhere else. You can move guys around. And Lincoln has shown, like, the touchdown pass, I think it was to Deuce. in the Holiday Bowl where he brings Jacoby Lane and Deuce in the slot and puts the slot guys outside. I mean, that just moving guys around like that, I think again, you feel good about two deep at each spot, and I'm including Josiah Zamora, the walk on, as one of the two like backup interior receiver spots. I think he's a guy that can catch passes for USC this year. But you feel good about the top end of the group we've talked about, and now I think you have enough. Seven was not enough. Just two scholarship slot receivers was not going to be enough. Again, you'd go in with two slot receivers if you could add two elite defensive tackles, and that's where your numbers were going. But if you can't do that, you got to have enough receivers to get through the year, especially because Lemon and Branch, those guys are going to be heavily involved in special teams too, kickoffs and punt returns. But no, the talent, Jacoby Lane, I think maybe takes 2 games to start getting talked about like in a big way nationally. People know Deuce, people know Zachariah just from the recruiting process. But again, from everything we've heard, Jacoby Lane is ready to go right now. And we've talked the last year. I mean, everybody knew Jordan Addison was going to lead the team in receiving, right? Like that when he came in, that was easy. Here's your number one guy. He's going to catch the most passes that year. Last year, we talked a lot about, leading receiver this year. Maybe it's him. Maybe it's him. Maybe it's him. I think Taj got like some attention there for that. Mekhi Lemon could be the guy this year. There still doesn't feel like the one guy who's just going to be the volume receiver. But I think he has a chance right now with the way he's looked to kind of be that guy. So no, the talent, now the depth at wide receiver. Go ahead and start the season now.
Yeah, with Jacoby Lane and Mekhi Lemon, I sort of get the Dwayne Jarrett, Steve Smith vibes from those two, and now you're talking about the two guys who aren't yet known, but I think they have that kind of ability. With Deuce Robinson, you have a rare skill set. A guy that tall with arms that long, who's that fast. I mean, that's a crazy matchup problem. And he's fast.
Did you see
I don't know if people
he had in that touchdown he had in the Holiday?
Yeah, no, I don't know if people realize just how well he can run. When you have that size and those arms and that speed, you're going to create matchup problems. And we've seen Zachariah Branch from the first moment he stepped on the field. When that guy's in space, he's a gigantic problem. I don't know that they used him effectively at wide receiver last year the way I would have hoped, but he was a true freshman. I think that will improve. He's a guy that you have to move around and get the ball into his hands in many different ways. We're going to see some jet sweeps. We're going to see some reverses. We're going to see some tunnel screens. We're going to see, right? You just have to get the ball in his hands, because he's a threat to make two guys miss and score every time he touches it, and that creates huge problems for a defense. So yeah, I think they have the depth, they have the frontline talent. This is a really solid receiving group. So it's hard not to feel good about that group. Let's go quarterback. I mean, it's been a couple of years since people wondered whether USC was going to have solid quarterback play. Do we have what we need at that group? Eric, what do you think?
Yeah, I mean, in the weird world of NIL and transfer portal and whatever, right? Like you can't set it up. You can't have 4 quarterbacks who can all start for you at the same time. I know there's probably a handful of programs out there that have that, but with the way this thing went, right? Like you had the 2 years of Caleb Williams, and now being able to hold on to Miller Moss and bring in Jaden Maeva, that feels like a best case scenario. I mean, it'd be great just for the room if Malachi Nelson had stayed, and then you've got kind of that group with Jake Jensen there. Yeah, having another really talented scholarship quarterback on this, that would be obviously the preference in terms of building the program and looking down the road. For this year, what you need on the field right now to win games, 2 quarterbacks. Yeah, this is set up really well. Again, I always think if you have to go to a third quarterback, you got problems anyway. I mean, that's not a winning season where if you're going to a third quarterback. Now, Ohio State, I know there's like the outlier season where they won the national championship with Cardale Jones. So you can, but I'm going to go ahead and say, yes, two quarterbacks that you feel good about playing right now. That is right up there with a best case scenario for a quarterback room.
Yeah, no, Eric hits the nail on the head. You're not going to have more than two starting level quarterbacks on your roster anymore. NIL, transfer portal, it's taken that dynamic where USC's got quarterbacks just waiting their turn. That's gone. That's history. That's not going to happen ever again. And case in point, he brought it up. Malachi Nelson is now playing at Boise State. If you're considered, finger quotes, an NFL quarterback, you're not sitting for more than a year. So you're going to go to any program. And if you're the top flight quarterback, there's going to be enough NIL hanging around at any program to keep you satisfied. So, yeah, Miller Moss, Jaden Mayava, Gage Roy, you have enough. Jake Jensen, like Eric said, once you get into third string, if you're talking about your third string quarterback, that's probably not a good thing.
Yeah, I think look, do you have two guys I feel pretty good about? You do. Do you have an elite guy? I guess we'll find out. I don't know the answer to that right now, right? I mean, it wouldn't surprise me if Miller Moss came out and played extremely well. It wouldn't surprise me if Jade Mayava, if he saw the field, played extremely well. But those aren't sure things. And so, Miller Moss has played one really good game. Jaden Mayava had a good freshman season. So this is a spot where I think you have two guys that are pretty good. I don't know if you have a superstar yet, and it wouldn't be a total shock if USC had some struggles at quarterback in a way that they really haven't over the last couple of years. Now that's not fair. It's not fair to compare compare either one of these guys to a Heisman Trophy winner and the #1 overall pick, and maybe the most talented college quarterback I've ever seen. It just so happens to be that they're filling his shoes, so you're going to get those comparisons. But USC has had these situations before. Carson Palmer was unbelievably talented. He walked out, and a kid who wasn't nearly as talented played just as well, if not better. So we'll see what happens. I think we're okay there. Now, how USC is a quarterback is going to be greatly influenced by this next position group. Does USC have what they need at the offensive line? Mark?
Well, I can go back to my line that I gave you for the defensive line. They have what they have. So I think your first, I would say if you're going too deep, you feel pretty good with 9 guys, because it's that 10th guy, that backup left tackle, where you've already got a second-year guy as your starting left tackle in Elijah Page. Right behind him, at least according to the depth the depth chart that we saw, you've got true freshman Justin Tauenu. But outside of that, you're good and you're too deep. I mean, as far as experience, youth that you can utilize, it is what it is right now. Again, same thing with the defensive line. You went in there with your biggest impact need was interior help on the defensive line, depth at offensive tackle. And when you're going in the transfer portal, especially for offensive linemen, if you're an offensive tackle, you're going to a place where you want to start, especially if you've got 1 year left. And I don't think anybody is coming to USC with 1 year left thinking, I'm probably going to unseat Elijah Page. I'm probably going to remove Mason Murphy. That's not going to happen. And any guys who have multiple years, that's kind of that rock in the hard place where they have to say, all right, USC's pretty young. They brought in a lot of young guys these last couple of years. Do I go over there and want to compete with that, or go find another location? I think that's why USC struggled in the transfer portal, getting those depth pieces at offensive tackle. There's no 1 year guys out there that are instant starters if they come to USC. There weren't when the portal opened, and there aren't now. So you kind of have to use what's available. And I think that's the approach the coaching staff is looking at it right now.
What do you think, Eric? Is this offense? We feel pretty good at quarterback. We feel good at running back. We feel fantastic at wide receiver. For Lincoln Riley to have a Lincoln Riley offense, he needs an offensive line group that can play well. Is this group going to play well?
I think this group is a bigger if than the if the defense is better. I'm more convinced that the defense will be fine than I am that the offensive line is going to be good enough for USC offense to be the USC offense that it's been the last couple of years. And they've been that USC. I mean, you look at some of the sort of advanced rushing numbers last year in terms of yards generated before contact and those kinds of things where it show that typically it would show, oh, that's a dominant offensive line. USC did unbelievably well there. And a lot of that is Lincoln Riley's run game structure. A lot of that was what Marshawn Lloyd kind of could do with the ball in his hands. But the numbers were okay there. But I think if we look at it, right, that offensive line was not a dominant offensive line. There's nothing in this group right now where I sit here and say, oh, they are locked in. I think if you could go back, if that 2023 group was the 2022 group and they had another year, right? This was their third year, you'd feel pretty good about those guys. But you don't have that year. And so the ifs all across the board are huge because whenever you go into a year, and I remember Josh Henson said this, maybe before the 2022 season, where he just basically said, like, you cannot go into a year going, these are my starters, this is it. Like, we're gonna go all the way through. He's like, that does not happen. It does not happen where you play your starting five in every single game. So the idea of talking about the offensive line and saying, oh, if they stay healthy, that's a non-starter. So you have to look at how do they bring those backups in, and across the board, it is a huge hit when you start talking about, okay, bring this next guy in or shuffle things around so that you can make a move here. The offensive line is for me maybe the biggest if. If you take everyone a step forward, right? If Elijah Page does take that step forward and the buzz that you hear about him is true and it's okay, he's healthy all year. I know I just kind of contradicted myself there, but yeah, if he's healthy all year there, you like what you have out there. Emmanuel Prignon, right? Like got better and better, felt more comfortable. You're not going to flip him to a new spot here, so there's comfort level there. I know everybody loves Jonah Monheim at center. That right side is where it's again you're the huge ifs, and there really isn't, oh, if that doesn't work out, well, you can just quickly transition here. Like it's you got it. Those guys got to work. Alani Noah at right guard, Mason Murphy at right tackle. I know there's some backups, Amos Talele and guys like that. I know Gino is there if he gets healthy and is back. And so, yeah, there's pieces, but again, the pieces are the fourth or fifth best offensive line in the conference if everybody plays well and everybody takes a step forward. So the ceiling is not the best offensive line in the Big Ten, and the floor is down there towards the bottom. So yeah, the hope is that you can put it together. The fear is that you just absolutely bottom line do not have enough right now in this group.
Yeah, I think they might be able to I don't think they can handle an injury at center. I mean, they can plug some guys in, but it's going to be a giant drop off if you lose Monheim. I think at guard, you could probably, if you had to go a game or two where you plug in one of the guys you mentioned, or maybe Michael Banuelos, maybe you can have a guy who can come in and play. I think Elijah Page is going to play well. I don't know if he goes down. I don't know that you have a replacement for him. I think you've got giant problems if that happens. I think Alani Noah, it's his second year. He's a big dude and a strong guy. He did play some last year. you know, he may be a John Drake or a Deuce Latui for those guys who remember those teams. I mean, he's got that kind of stature to him. And then we'll see what happens at right tackle. I mean, Mason Murphy played well in that spring game, but you never know what that means. Does that mean our edge rushers aren't what we thought they'd be? I don't know. We just won't know. But you don't have the depth that you want. You have a lot of guys who I think will eventually be good football players, but a lot of them are young, and you don't want to have to bring a bunch of sophomores or even freshmen off the bench to play. You just don't. So I think the answer with the offensive line is that if they stay relatively healthy, and they have to stay healthy at left tackle, they have to stay healthy at center. If they do that, then I think the offensive line can probably play well enough in light of the fact that you have Lincoln Riley and you have a skill position group that is really good. But it's a question mark, and against the mediocre teams on the schedule, USC is going to score plenty of points. I don't think there's any doubt about that. And you've seen that throughout Lincoln Riley's career. The question is, when you have one of those difficult games away from the Coliseum, like in South Bend last year, and everything's just falling apart, this is an offensive line that can give you some of those if things don't come together. The good news is last year they tried to take a bunch of pieces that had played well somewhere else, and they threw them all together at the last minute and hoped they would gel. They didn't. This year, it's a bunch of guys who know each other, and so maybe that will help. But I'm with you. I am nervous about the O-line, although I like pieces of it, and I like the future of it. But are we going to like it in October when you have a tough road game? Are we going to like it in Ann Arbor in September? I don't know. I don't know if we're going to like that.
I mean, you look back at high school recruiting. I mean, the 2020, 2021, 2022 class, those third year, fourth year, fifth year guys that need to make up a bulk of your offensive and defensive lines. And on the offensive line, it's Jonah and it's Mason Murphy from those three classes. And I'm not talking about starters. I'm talking about on the roster at all. I mean, that's your haul in 2024 from three high school recruiting classes on the offensive line. It just the misses, the guys they didn't take, it's just sort of led to this. I mean, it's honestly impressive that they've been able to sort of tread water and throw pieces in and get a line that has produced some wins and a Heisman Trophy quarterback, and has us talking about now, like, yeah, I think they can hold this together. I think they can be okay. It's, you go back and look at some of that stuff, and it's just mind-boggling how bad sort of the retention and the development and just how things have gone for any number of reasons, right? It's players, it's development, it's coaches, it's just injury, it's circumstance, whatever it is. But that to me just jumps out when you talk about the group they have now, looking back at the classes.
Yeah, of the many things that Clay Helton's going to have to answer for on Judgment Day, I suspect those three offensive line recruiting classes are going to be right up at the top of the list. I mean, that's just malpractice of the highest order. And for a guy who talks about he's the son of an O-line coach, he probably should have considered that you need 5 of those guys, which means you have to recruit more than 1 or 2 a season. Just awful. But we'll see. We've got the guys we've got, Mark. We're going to play and see what happens. All right, let's move on to the next topic. We'll see what the UC Regents decide to do, but apparently the proposal has been made that UCLA should pay Cal $10 million a year for at least the next 6 years as compensation for saving its athletic program from bankruptcy and taking a good offer to go to the Big Ten. All right, what do you think about this, guys? I mean, I usually don't feel sorry for UCLA, and I don't know that I feel sorry for them now, but what do we think of this penalty that the Bruins need to pay to Cal? Mark, go ahead. I know you want to talk about the Cal Bears.
I just think it's hysterical that the cost of living in California just continues to go up. I mean, I think what this defines is UCLA truly is the southern branch of UC Berkeley. The fact that they have to pay $10 million a year as some sort of restitution, alimony, however you want to characterize this, for breaking up the family is hysterical. Now, you're the legal eagle here. Is this even legal? How can you charge another institution $10 million a year and say, we're going to do it for an arbitrary number of 6 years? You need to give us $60 million because we're not as good as you in sports.
I mean, I don't know that it's another institution. They're not sending an invoice to USC for a reason. They're sending it, the UC Regents have decided they're going to move their chess pieces internally, and poor Cal, which did absolutely nothing at all to put itself in its current terrible predicament, apparently, has to pay the price. What do you think, McKinney? $10 million a year, is that fair money for the Bears?
I mean, we're still talking about projected, and we are recommending they should do this and all of that. So I like any reminder of how I know that it's necessary, right? But I like any reminder of just how dumb this whole thing is, of USC and UCLA having to go to the Big Ten because the Pac-12 was just so unbelievably mismanaged, and just all the garbage fallout from this whole thing. And you just hope that eventually we can skip all of this nonsense and get back to the regional divisions of the SEC and Big Ten, or however this falls out. So yeah, I mean, I think that everything is just sort of posturing and conversation or whatever until the ultimate realignment happens. So yes, the idea that UCLA jumped through all these hoops, and again, sort of in this move, I know that they released a video the other day. This is not about this specific topic, but the idea that UCLA constantly just sort of shows themselves as, we only care about how we appear in relation to USC, with this video that they put out of highlights of last year's game. And this move being, we got to go with USC, we got to do this with USC, and then sort of the hook pulling them back. No, you're still connected to this. It's funny, but ultimately it's just, again, another reminder of how kind of ludicrous this whole thing has been, in kind of tail wagging the dog of TV networks pulling the strings of college football realignment and everything we've got going on now.
Yeah, again, why 6 years? Why is it why the arbitrary number? How did they settle on 60 million?
Well, here's the interesting thing. The University of California did a study. They issued a report talking about how much harm would be done to the remaining institutions with USC and UCLA leaving. And what the UC's own report suggested is that USC leaving was costing everybody else about $10 million a year, and UCLA leaving was costing everybody about $3 million a year. So if I'm looking at it as UCLA, I'm saying, wait a minute, you guys said I'm costing you $3 million a year, and now I have to pay 10 because USC left. Not sure how that's fair. Look, but I wouldn't expect anything from the UC Regents that would make sense. They oversaw 2/12 of this conference that imploded because nobody had any idea what they were doing. They certainly didn't help. And Cal, I'm not sure when Cal last cared about actually putting real athletic teams on the field, but it's been a long time. And it's the attitude of institutions like Cal that got the Pac-12 where they were. There's no reason that Cal should have been miserable every single year of football since Aaron Rodgers left, right? It makes no sense at all, except that they weren't committed to it. They weren't putting in an effort. They're making no money. They're dragging down the top teams in the league because they don't put forth an effort. And then what do they want UCLA to do? That UCLA stays in the Pac-12 and can't pay their bills? I mean, I know John Canzano sent around an article, suggesting, well, maybe if UCLA would have stayed, the Pac-12 could have survived because they still would have captured the LA market. No, John, it's not the LA market. Nobody cares about UCLA football, including UCLA. When USC leaves, the Pac-12 implodes. UCLA sticking around doesn't mean, oh, we got LA locked down. We can still make 1/3 of what the Big Ten makes, so everything's good. I mean, this is the sort of thinking that has brought the Pac-12 down from the beginning. It was horribly run, badly mismanaged by a bunch of programs and schools that didn't know what they were doing and frankly didn't care that much. And so they were willing to have Larry Scott go and do his lunacy for years, and renew his scholarship. They see that the Big Ten and the SEC are separating. They know that the Pac-12 can't compete with it. How does USC compete with Ohio State if Ohio State's bringing in $100 million in television revenue and USC's bringing in $30 million? Answer that question, people who are complaining that USC decided to leave. Answer the question. The answer is they don't care that USC can't compete with Ohio State, but USC decided it did care, finally, after a long time of seemingly not caring itself. So the whole thing is ridiculous, but it is funny. And, you know, the Bruins are going to have to pay $10 million. Fortunately, they saved by hiring a coach that they're probably paying $62,000 to next year. So they're saving some money that way. But still, it's an absurd situation. Okay. We'll play around a little bit with this. Here's the question. I want you to tell me the best you've ever seen in college at the following positions. Keep it quick. We'll just run through it. Just give me the best guy. Culkin, start us off. Best college quarterback you've ever seen.
Okay, so I don't want to upset a lot of people. Caleb
He's going to
Williams.
say Vince Young.
Oh, no. I promise you I'm not.
That's not a terrible answer, but go ahead, Mark.
So Caleb Williams, great Heisman winner, but I would have loved to have seen Caleb Williams and Michael Vick go one-on-one in a football. They can't go one-on-one in a football game, but Michael Vick at quarterback at Vatech that year was pretty damn good. He was a fun player to watch.
He was not bad. I mean, on the football field. I don't know about the dogs. McKinney, who's the best college quarterback you've ever seen?
So I went, just so you know, for all the rest of these, I went live. And so Caleb's my answer. The stuff that he did was just unbelievable.
Yeah, see, Caleb Williams is the most talented college quarterback I've ever seen. I think quarterbacks probably unfairly get judged by a different standard, and he doesn't have the resume that some of the other guys have. I mean, you could make an argument for Vince Young. You can make an argument for Tim Tebow, Matt Leinart, resume-wise, as good as any. I'm actually going to go with one that can't even throw. I'm going to go with Tommy Frazier, who was an extraordinary quarterback, playing running back at quarterback. He didn't throw the ball very much, probably only had 1,000 yards passing, but a tremendous talent on an offense that was, at least in 1995, unbelievable. And had one of the great runs that you'll ever see in a college football game, where every person on the Florida roster, past and present, tried to tackle him and it didn't work. Okay, this is the easiest question I'll ask you. If anybody gets this wrong, it's shameful. McKinney, who's the best college running back you've ever seen?
Yeah, it's Reggie.
It's not. Mark, what is it?
So it's Reggie, but it's not.
It's not. It's Barry Sanders, and it's not close.
Reggie's
Again, I went into this saw live, right? So those are what mine are going to be.
When you say live, you mean actually in the stadium? Because that's
Yeah.
that's gonna cut down on the number of people you can actually nominate here. But that's fine.
Oh, I thought this was supposed to be difficult.
Well, I don't want to make it too difficult for you guys for obvious reasons. Okay, the answer is Barry Sanders, who I saw live on television. I did not see in person. He is the best college running back, and he's light years ahead of everybody else. But Reggie may very well be number 2 on that list. Okay, how about this one? Best wide receiver. Culkin, go.
BMW.
Okay. You're talking my language. I'm not going to give that answer, but I like it. McKinney, who is it?
Yeah, that's Mike Williams.
2 very good answers. I'm not going to be a homer because I'm going to be a homer later on. So I'm going to go with Randy Moss here, we talked about Deuce Robinson with his size and his speed being a mismatch for everybody. I don't know that anybody in football history has been more of a mismatch than Randy Moss, who was very 6'5", long arms, and as Bobby Bowden put it, ran like a scalded dog. Okay, best linebacker you ever saw. McKinney.
Again, live in person for me, Chris Claiborne at USC. Unbelievable.
Culkin?
Yeah, I'm trying to keep my answers away from USC, so I'm going Brian Bosworth. That mohawk, the neck roll, the half shirt, the psychotic look in the eye. That's what I want. That's what I want at linebacker.
Yeah, I'm going Boss too. He was one of the most intimidating college football players you'd ever see, and I know people remember him now for getting run over by Bo Jackson as an NFL player, but Bosworth in college was frightening and a bigger than life personality in a day when there weren't a lot of those guys running around. Okay, best edge, McKinney, best edge you ever saw in college.
Kenichi is up there, number two. I saw Terrell Suggs a couple times, including that Holiday Bowl against Kansas State, and that guy was unreal at Arizona State.
Was fantastic player. Mark?
Was Jadeveon Clowney considered an edge?
I thought he was a
My team he
defensive
was.
tackle, but maybe he was a defensive end. Maybe that counts. You
On
want
my
to go
team,
Clowney?
yeah, on
All
my
right, I'm
team.
gonna give the right answer. The right answer is Junior Seau. Absolutely. I mean, he only had one real year at USC, where he played all the time, but he was unblockable, absolutely unblockable that entire season, and played with an attitude that was just fun to watch. Okay, best defensive tackle you ever saw in college. Who's up? Culkin, you're up. Go.
I'm going to go homer a little bit here. Sean Cody. That when he came in, he actually people forget he started playing over the ball before they moved him to the outside and played in. He was a defensive tackle, and he was pretty damn. I think he was a freshman All-American as well.
Was he better than his teammate Mike Patterson? I don't know. They were both amazing. Great football
remember
players.
Fat Pat scooping up the ball, running for the touchdown against UCLA. I will always remember him for that because it was just such a great run.
I mean, that guy dominated the A gaps. Just fantastic. Two great football players. McKinney, who is it? Best defensive tackle you ever saw?
So again, your rules. It's
Again, it has to be
Sue.
somebody you had lunch with. I know. Go ahead.
Exactly. So someone who's giving a private concert in my garage. So Sue and Sap, right, are the top two probably. But I was gonna tie, and it's the guys Mark didn't mention, Mike Patterson and Cedric Ellis. It was unreal watching those guys in the middle of the USC line.
I got one that brings back terrible memories for people who are watching the early 90s. Steve Entman from Washington. Just an absolute monster, and didn't do anything in the NFL, but as a college interior defensive line guy, just a one-man ball of destruction. An incredible football player. Okay, best offensive lineman you ever saw in college. McKinney, go ahead.
So Orlando Pace is the best offensive lineman, right? But for me, seeing it, Tony Baselli is the guy. I think Tony Baselli is kind of funny because he's the anti-Anthony Munoz, where Munoz always gets like the national credit for being the best USC offensive lineman because of what he did in the NFL. And Baselli did enough in the NFL, but was so unbelievable at USC. I don't know if he gets enough credit because of the NFL injuries that cut that career short. So that's it. Pace, I think overall, but Baselli, the guy that I saw.
Okay, Mark.
Baselli was my USC answer, and it's if you remember him taking that phone call when he was being drafted by Jacksonville, it was that answer that he gave. It's like, whoa, I don't want to line up against that guy. So, and God forgive me for saying this. I know Eric went with Orlando. He played across town. Jonathan Ogden was dominating.
Yeah, playing at the same time as Baselli too. I mean, there were two of the all-time greats playing in the same city at the same time. I also have Baselli as my guy. Baselli, if he doesn't, I mean, when Baselli was healthy in the NFL, he was as good as anybody. He was incredible. That was a guy you lock him in at left tackle, especially in college. And he played on some bad teams. He played on one decent team, I suppose. But Baselli was a guy you're not doing anything on that edge. You're not doing anything. He was fantastic. Best safety you ever saw, Culkin.
Man, there's been a lot of them at USC, but Sean Taylor, Miami.
Sean Taylor. Okay, Eric McKinney.
Peace.
It's Troy at USC. A secondary one. Talanoa Hufanga does not get enough credit for what he did playing in those years. He's a guy that would have been, I think, kind of an all-timer on any team that he played on. He could have played in any USC defense throughout history, but Troy's the guy for me.
I'm going with Troy also. I think you can make an argument for Ed Reed at Miami, who, most of the time when you talk about the best safeties in NFL history, you're talking about Lott, Ed Reed, Troy Polamalu as three, maybe the top three. Completely different players. Ed Reed was always in the right place, and he was a ball hawk. And once he picked the ball off, he was a problem because he'd run the ball back. Troy, you didn't know where Troy was going to be. You had no idea where Troy Polamalu was going to appear from. It was like he was magic, and he'd just show up in a spot you didn't expect and blow somebody up. I'm going to go with Troy. It may be a homer call, but it's not that much of a homer call because the guy is one of the best that ever played. Best corner you've ever seen in college, Eric.
Adoree was pretty good. This is one of those interesting things whenever you talk about the USC all-time team, you get to corner and you're like, can I put a safety at corner? Can we talk about Ronnie Lott as a corner? So staying with guys that I've seen, Antoine Cason at Arizona was really good. And then because I've tried not to say Oregon guys, I don't know if people remember Ifo Ekpreolomu at Oregon he was really good. Southern California kid that USC didn't really chase. So those are a couple Southern California guys that played in the Pac-10, 12, I think.
Mark, who you got? Best college corner you ever saw?
Yeah, it's so if I can't pick a USC player, and Eric mentioned a young Ron Lott, who started his career at cornerback. How do you keep primetime off that list?
You can't. That's the answer.
That dude shut down half the field.
Yeah, that's the answer, and obviously, it doesn't fit within Eric's interpretation of the rule because I've never actually met Dion in person, and he's never been to one of my kids' birthday parties. But I did see him play in college, and
he pushed you into the transfer portal too. I think he was responsible for that. It was, everybody else.
Yeah. He's going to turn it. He's going to have 100 new players this year. Look, he was so good that you were scared to throw the ball that side of the field. Incredible once he had the ball in his hands. He was one of those few guys. There are only a handful that you'll ever see where even at the NFL level, they just jump out as far more athletic than anybody else on the field. And in college, he was incredible. And I think I didn't see it, but I've read the story since. Dion at the NFL Combine, who shows up, runs the 40, runs a 4.2 something, doesn't stop, just leaves the facility, doesn't tell anybody goodbye, doesn't just goes. Yeah, that's the guy for me. Okay.
So Patrick Peterson, I think, deserves credit there too. And he was Patrick Johnson when he came out to a USC camp and was again that. So I guess I saw him technically live there. Just unbelievable. And he was a guy that Pete Carroll was just following around the entire time that he was there.
Yeah, he was an unbelievable player. Okay, are we ready to play the game, guys? Now, I want to add one rule. The rule this time, Mark, you can't sabotage yourself. You can't give away the game, okay? Because people blame me. When you do that, you're like the White Sox. You're throwing games, and I'm getting blamed. I don't want that, okay?
I know how to martyr myself.
Okay, well, we're going to see what happens today. The score is 0-0. We're going for 10. We're playing for glory. Question number 1. Mark, you're going to start us off. Does the Notre Dame game become less important with USC's move to the Big Ten and with the playoff expansion?
The answer is no.
you want to add to
You
it, or
need
just
to elaborate on this, do you?
Yeah, it's up to you. It's your game. Eric, he just wants to say no. Do you have anything to say?
Yeah, I know I just every week I show up and I know you love when we don't give straight answers to these, so I want to do that for you as consistently as I can. The answer is nationally, yes. Individually, for hopefully the programs and certainly for us, no. It still matters that you beat Notre Dame every single year, and now potentially in the playoff, getting a chance to beat them twice in a year is incredible. But I think nationally, the fact that that game can happen and both teams can still go to the playoff like the next week if they play at the end of the season, it's not quite as important in terms of when you're talking about these gigantic rivalries.
Mark, you wanted to give a one-word answer before. Now you want to talk. Go ahead. You can talk.
I appreciate Eric making the argument for me. I think it actually adds an element to the rivalry.
Is that what you did, Eric? Did you make his argument for him?
Does that get him less points?
Yes.
Okay, yeah. I think I did a great job of that then.
No, I think what Eric said is right, that every regular season game is less important now than it used to be, because when you have 12 teams in the playoff, you can lose 2, and if you're in the Big Ten, you're going to be in. And this will lead all kinds of USC fans who aren't really USC fans, and that's right, I'm calling you out if you think this, to say, we shouldn't even schedule Notre Dame anymore. We have this really difficult schedule already. It doesn't matter. Don't bring that. The Notre Dame game is still the most important game on the schedule if you're USC. It always will be. And even if you have Ohio State on the schedule, it's still the most important game on the schedule. But every regular season game means less than it did before, because before, if you wanted to be in the top 2 in the old days, then you probably had to go undefeated. Maybe you could get away with 1 loss. When it was top 4, you could get away with 1 loss most of the time, or last year with Florida State, you couldn't even get away with an undefeated season. But once it's top 12, you let a bunch of teams in, and that does cheapen the regular season. As much fun as the playoff will be, it does.
I will say, and yeah. I will say this, and I don't want to do this to give Mark a point, but it does set up, and especially the USC home Notre Dame game at the end of the year, it does set up for the potential where it's an elimination game for the playoff, and then that becomes like another point to where that rivalry game is phenomenal. So there's an if, but just the general sense of a regular season game, I think you're right. They all don't mean much. I mean, not that they don't mean much, but you're gonna have some.
You guys are talking at the same time. Nobody has any idea what you're saying. Okay, Mark, go ahead. Go ahead. You were interrupting, but go ahead.
It sounds like Eric's coming along. I'm leading the horse to water. You guys will eventually take a drink.
Yeah, well, I mean, Eric conceded that saying that was going to give you a point, and so it did. It's 1-1. Question number 2. What player could USC not afford to lose in 2024? Eric, go.
I'm just going to give you 1, even though I want to give you 2. Bear Alexander is my guy for that one.
Okay, Mark?
I'm staying in the trenches, but I'm going with Jonah Monheim because of his versatility. We know what Bear can do, where he plays. You lose Jonah, you're losing potentially a tackle, you're losing your center, you're losing a guy who can play either guard position. You talk about the guy you need on offensive line, you cannot lose him.
You both get a point. Those are the 2 most important players on this year's team. It's 2-2. Best college stadium anthem: Rocky Top, Tennessee, or Country Roads? Mark, go.
Well, I'm a John Denver guy. Country Roads.
McKinney?
So it's Rocky Top because you said college stadium anthem, and that has actually gravitated from a real song to only a college stadium anthem. Country Roads still exists outside of the college stadium anthem.
I'm not even sure which way that cuts. You've confused me, Eric. I mean, you're right. Country Roads does exist apart from West Virginia, and so maybe they're just borrowing it a little bit. Is that what you're suggesting? Whereas Tennessee really owns theirs?
No, Rocky Top can only really exist in a college stadium. If you play Rocky Top outside of it, your immediate thought is Tennessee football. If you play Country Roads outside of it, your immediate thought is not West Virginia football. It's just singing along to Country Roads.
That's a strong argument, even though Country Roads is a better song, but I guess that's consistent with what you're saying. Eric McKinney gets a point. Good job, Eric. 3-2. Where is the best high school football played these days? Mark? You want to see the best high school football in the country? Where do you go?
Whenever the best teams from California go out of state to Texas or Nevada or Florida or wherever, they usually end up winning those games. Now, wouldn't it be great if those California high school teams had the crowds that the Texas high school games get? So the answer is California plays the best football. The best atmosphere is Texas.
Eric?
Yeah, I'm going to echo that a little bit. So the best high school football is played between the best California teams. The best game, if you just go to a random high school stadium somewhere Friday night, if you go to somewhere in Texas, that's probably where you're gonna find the best game on just two random teams together. But no, California's best teams and Trinity League specifically, best teams are the best teams in the country.
Well, Mater Dei and Bosco. Oh, we're talking about Mater Dei and Bosco. Mater Dei and Bosco are the two best teams in the country. They have been for some years now. They have cannibalized Southern California high school football, and so much of the rest of Southern California is a wasteland when it comes to college football in a way that Texas is not. And yes, you can. If you live in Dallas or Houston or probably Austin, you can go to almost any stadium and see high-level high school football with tremendous fan attendance. You both have the right answer. It's Bosco and Mater Dei, but if you're just talking about where high school football is done right, the answer is Texas. I haven't seen it in Florida. I'm sure they're fantastic. They certainly have a lot of great athletes, but Texas high school football is legitimate. You both get a point. It's 4-3. It's a good game. You guys are doing a good job today. I'm proud of you. Give me the sport. Oh. In what sport is the women's game better than the men's? Mark Olkin.
Yeah, I'm just going to put the misogynist tag right around my neck right now. It's volleyball. And I got the pictures to prove it. That's all I'm going to say.
Yeah, that's all you should say. Eric, what do you think?
So the sport, in terms of the sport I enjoy watching right now, women's basketball, I think, has caught men's basketball in terms of name recognition and the programs and the atmosphere and all of that. I think that, for me, in terms of college. And then for professional, I don't know if it's better, but women's tennis to me is the same thing as watching men's tennis. I think there's a bunch of reasons to watch that.
Yeah. Women's tennis is, here's the thing. Women's college basketball is becoming hugely popular. The reason I can't go with that answer is because whatever boys team wins CIF would win the WNBA. So they're playing the exact same game as the men. They're not playing it as well. I tell you what I think they do better is in some of the Olympic sports. I think the women's figure skating, fantastic. Women's gymnastics, fantastic, right? Am I wrong on this, fellas?
I'm on the same
page. Whatever. I'm not going to give anybody a point, including myself. It's still 4-3. Greatest one-hit wonder in music history. Culkin, who is it?
Ooh. Come on, Eileen. Dexy's Midnight Runners.
Okay, solid. Eric?
So I'm going to have to explain myself because you're not going to like this initially. The greatest one-hit wonder band is Los Del Rio that did Macarena, because the difference between their hit to everything else is so gigantic that no other band really comes close to having the type of cultural phenomenon behind their one hit compared to nothing else outside of that.
I think that's a really compelling argument. The only reason I'm not going to go with it is because I hate that song. But you're right. You have entire stadiums jumping up and doing this, and nobody can name anything else they did. I think the right answer may be a hot take on me. I once asserted that it was American Pie.
Don McClain.
Don McLean. And then somebody got furious with me because apparently in Ireland he had a second song that was a giant hit and they love it. And so an Irish woman almost beat me up when I asserted that. Okay, Macarena probably never should have been created. Mark Colkin gets a point. It's 4-4. Give me the sport where you have to be somewhat crazy even to participate. McKinney.
So for me, it's distance running at more than a mile. Like the ultra marathoners are just beyond saving. The other sport though, Calcio Storico, I don't know if you saw Home Game on Netflix.
It did.
So that's one where I looked it up. They have six tournaments that have not had a winner in the last 40 years because of what is called uncontrolled brawls did not allow the game to finish.
Let's explain what this is. Calcio Storico is played in Florence. It's been played there for 500-600 years. You have to be born in Florence to play, and they split up the city into 4 quadrants. So whatever quadrant you're in, that's the team you play for. And it's a combination of like handball, soccer, and just MMA. And really, the frontline guys aren't really blocking so much as they are just brawling. They're just punching, they're tackling each other, they're breaking arms. It's absolutely insane. And that's a fine choice. I think the right answer is
Oh, Mark's got to go. You're gonna give Mark the answer. This is his fastest way to points.
I was trying to help him. Mark, go ahead. What's your answer? I felt I get so many requests not to let Mark answer questions anymore. But go ahead, Mark. Go ahead and do it.
So let me ask the judge for a question. Is the slap game considered a sport right now? At the face.
Yeah, I guess it is.
You got to be freaking psycho to play that game.
Yeah, you do.
People are dying doing that.
What about this free climbing business where you mountain climb without ropes? If you've seen the documentary on Alex Honnold, if you watch that, you realize the lifespan of a guy who does that has to be measured in months in most cases, right? It's absolutely insane what they do. I like both those answers. I love Calcio Storico. I actually, Florence is one of my favorite cities. I would like to go there at some point and actually watch the tournament. But everybody gets a point. It's 5-5. All right, here's one that could make you unpopular with a lot of people. Will Miller Moss be better than any of Lincoln Riley's previous starters at quarterback? Mark. And if so, who?
I'm just thinking of all of his previous starters. Yes, will he be better than all of them or
any? Will he be better than any of Lincoln Riley's previous starters?
Absolutely.
Okay, yeah. Who?
Oh, he'll be better than Spencer Rattler.
Huh?
He'll be better than Spencer Rattler.
Spencer Rattler. That's the lowest hanging fruit, but I don't know how low hanging it is. Okay.
You're asking is he going to be better than his Heisman winners? I guess we're going to have to answer that question at the end of the season. Right now, yes, he will be better than any of Lincoln Riley's previous starters. You asked me to pick that one.
Colkin says yes, he's better than Spencer Rattler this year. Eric, what do you think?
So yeah, I mean Rattler's the one that you'd go after. I'm gonna raise the bar a little bit, and I'm gonna have Jalen Hurts as the guy that he's got to chase. And I honestly think he can get there. So the running ability is what separates Hurts, and where ultimately that's a different conversation. But playing the quarterback position, how effectively he can play that. Looking at Hurts at Oklahoma, just under 70% completion percentage, 3,800 yards, and then a 32-8 touchdown to interception ratio. Yeah. I think Miller can get there to that kind of quarterback season for him. So yeah, I mean what Rattler did in his starting thing, yes, I think he's clearly going to be beyond that. I think Miller can get to where Hurts. Now Jalen Hurts ran for 1,300 yards and 20 touchdowns that year. So no, Miller Moss is not going to put up whatever that is, 50 some odd touchdowns. But I think he can get to that kind of efficiency throwing the ball. Yeah.
Okay, so we have a yes Spencer Rattler, then we have a yes Spencer Rattler and a guy who finished number 2 in the Heisman voting and won a Super Bowl. The answer is
Wait, do I think Miller Moss can win a Super Bowl this year? No. Is that what you're holding me to?
no, I don't. I'm just asking whether he's going to be better than any of the previous starters. You said yes. Look, I think he has a shot to be better than Spencer Rattler. I don't know that that's a given. Spencer Rattler had a pretty good career. I mean, if Caleb Williams isn't there, Rattler probably starts 4 years at Oklahoma. He was a very competent quarterback at South Carolina. I think he probably plays better than Rattler. That's no sure thing. He is not going to be better than Jalen Hurts for the reason you identified, because even if his passing numbers are better, his rushing numbers are not going to be anywhere in the universe. And remember, Jalen Hurts is the guy that came in that first quarter against USC as a true freshman and completely changed around that game. Alabama's offense wasn't doing anything, and Hurts came in, and from that point on, it was an avalanche of pain. So I think it's going to be tough, not necessarily because Miller Moss won't be good, because I think he will be, but just because Lincoln Riley's starting quarterbacks as a group have been unbelievable. I mean, it really, you look at you could be the worst of his starting quarterbacks and still be a really good football player. I'm going to give the point to Mark because Eric is claiming he's going to be better than a guy who's already won a Super Bowl. Makes no sense. All right, your current level of faith in USC's NIL organization and strategy. McKinney, go. Give me like a 1 through 10.
I thought we were going to pick like an animal or something that it makes.
If you want to.
1 through 10. I mean, 4. I think is where that is. So Lincoln Riley has talked about wanting to put together the best roster in college football. I mean, that's what he said. We think that we can build the best roster in college football. I assume he means every year putting it together. Now, bringing in players, high school recruiting is a big part of that. Bringing in players via the transfer portal is a big part of that. So if you're not able to do that when when there are guys out there that can help you put the best roster together, that's a big reason why. Whatever it is, if there's not enough money, if there's not enough of a push to go out and touch base with guys early, if you can't close on guys, whatever that is, this is a big part of how you put the best roster together. If you look at USC's roster right now, it is not up there with the best rosters in college football. So you can't say that it's been a tremendous success. If they're building something and they see the vision and it eventually gets there, then that number changes. But right now, with the roster you have in 2024, I don't see how you go higher than a 5 on that.
Okay. Well, you didn't go higher than 5. You went with 4.
I didn't.
Okay.
Well, I'm setting Mark up where if he goes higher than a 5, we can both together bash him.
Yeah, we will. Mark, go ahead. You go higher than 5? I don't think you are you?
No, I'm going to stick at 5. My question is, what is the strategy? It seems like the goalposts are always moving when it comes to USC's NIL. At first, it was, all right, we got to get our things in place so we can retain the roster. And then, well, we got everything in place for that 2025 defensive line class, but we don't have the money in place or the package in place to attack the transfer portal at your most pressing and most immediate needs. So until I know what their strategy is, what exactly they want to do, my level of confidence is hovering around 4.5, 5. It seems like they can't chew gum and walk at the same time. It's always they're choosing one or the other at the moment. They can't do both.
Yeah, I think 4.5 are probably a little bit generous at this point. Although if you had asked me 2 months ago, I would have felt comfortable with those numbers. And this is not a shot at House of Victory. It's not a shot at Spencer Harris, who I like and I think is a smart guy. But here's the reality: USC is not an elite recruiting school right now. They're not. Coach Henney may make it where they land a gigantic defensive line recruiting class. If USC's NIL holds up, I think they will do that. But I have very real concerns. And at this point, USC is recruiting at a lower level than Oregon pretty consistently, and that's never been true in 100 years of USC and Oregon football. It's never been true. Even when Oregon was the better program and USC was run by coaches that didn't know what they're doing, USC was still better recruiting overall than Oregon. Oregon would steal some players out of USC's backyard, but it was still the place to go. That has changed, and it hasn't changed because Oregon has fancy uniforms. The uniforms and all that stuff that Oregon does, all that flash, that helped Oregon get to a second-tier level. But what's put Oregon over the top as a recruiting entity is giant bags of cash. USC does not compete with Oregon in NIL, and therefore they're not competing with Oregon in recruiting right now. That's just the way it is. And it's absolutely true that Lincoln Riley said he wanted to put together the best roster in the country, and instead he's putting together a bottom half of a top 20 roster. That's what he's putting together. And I don't know that it's because he can't recruit. I think that there's just an inability to raise the kind of money that other schools have raised. So that's kind of a bummer, but it is what it is. All right. I'm going to give that point to Eric McKinney, and the only reason I'm going to give it to Eric McKinney is to make it 6-6 going into the last question. Here it is. Who is the most believable actor who ever portrayed an athlete in a major film? Okay, Mark Culkin, who was it?
Well, it's either Sylvester Stallone playing Rocky or the horse that played Seabiscuit, because I think that horse nailed it. And
well, which one do you want to go with?
Because I see the look in your eye, I'm going to go with Sylvester Stallone.
That's not what he really feels. I can tell that's not what he really feels.
Yeah. There's a lack of authenticity in that answer now. I don't know what we're going to do about that. But McKinney, what's the answer?
Yeah. So the I was gonna look. I had a boxer too, not Stallone as Rocky, although he's up there. De Niro as Jake LaMotta in Raging Bull is my answer. The Miracle hockey players, though, because that was a requirement that they be able to skate. That's the best like sports action that they've done in a movie. The real answer is no baseball player ever in any movie has ever done this correctly.
You don't like Charlie Sheen in Major League?
Yeah, that's
none of them believable.
No, Charlie Sheen was fantastic in Major League. He looked like a pitcher. His mechanics were good. And you guys both got the boxer wrong, because Sylvester Stallone is terrible as a boxer. Terrible. De Niro, terrible as a boxer. But Apollo Creed, that guy can box, right? That's legitimate. He moved like a boxer, had a nice jab. He didn't keep his right hand up very high, but he didn't have to because he was so quick. He was like Roy Jones in his prime. The answer, and the reason that Mark is going to get the point, is because McKinney made that bold claim about no baseball player, and I actually disagree. I think Charlie Sheen was fantastic. I mean, Wesley Snipes can't hit. Tom Berenger. I mean, that whole sequence where he bunts, the bunt and run. I mean, it's obvious he has no idea what he's doing. It's terrible. Even Corbin Burnson. I mean, Corbin Burnson was a disaster as a baseball player, but Charlie Sheen could do it. And because Eric McKinney denigrated Charlie Sheen's performance when Sheen was in fact winning, the point goes to Mark Culkin. Mark, congratulations. You win today's game 7-6. How do you feel?
Hey, I'm going to go out and buy myself a Seabiscuit.
Okay. You should do that. I'm just giving you a chance to talk to see if you somehow throw away the game. I figured you would. You do something. concede a couple of points or something.
We're good.
No?
We're gonna give the fans a day off today.
All right, fellas. Anything else we want to say before we sign off today?
No, we're
Nothing?
good.
Nothing? All right. Save something clever up next time. Just take a note down before we start so you'll have something cool to say at the end. But no cool thing at the end today. All right. Thank you everybody for joining us. We'll see you next week. Until then, fight on.